Does this sound drive you absolutely crazy? If so, you might have something called misophonia, a condition where certain sounds trigger an extreme emotional reaction. For some, it's just a mild annoyance, but for others, it's rage, panic, or even a full body stress response. But why? What is misophonia? And why do some people experience it so intensely while others don't even notice these sounds? Today, we're diving into the science of sound and the brain to figure it out. Misophonia literally means hatred of sound, and that's exactly what it feels like. People with misophonia experience an extreme emotional reaction, anger, disgust, anxiety, when they hear certain sounds. Things like chewing, sniffling, tapping, breathing, lip smacking, pen clicking. And it's not just mild irritation. Some people feel an intense urge to flee the situation or even lash out at the person making the sound. It's like your fight or flight response kicks in, but instead of escaping a predator, you're trying to escape someone eating a banana. But here's the thing. This isn't just about being sensitive to sound. Misophonia seems to be linked to something deeper in the brain. Scientists used to believe misophonia was just an extreme irritation, nothing more than a pet peeve taken too far. However, groundbreaking brain imaging studies have proven otherwise. In 2017, researchers at Newcastle University used fMRI scans to study the brains of people with misophonia as they listened to their trigger sounds, things like chewing, breathing, or pen clicking. What they found was striking. The anterior insular cortex, or the AIC, this region processes emotions and bodily sensations, became hyperactive in people with misophonia. Their brains weren't just hearing these sounds, they were experiencing them in an intense, deeply emotional way, as if the sound was a direct threat to their well-being. They also saw changes to the amygdala, and this is the brain's built-in alarm system, responsible for detecting danger and triggering fight-flight. In misophonia, the amygdala overreacts to trigger sounds, treating them as a real and immediate threat. And as you know, I like to think of the amygdala as the brain's fire alarm. Once it goes off, it's nearly impossible to ignore. They also notice things in the prefrontal cortex. Now, normally, this part of the brain regulates emotions, controls impulses, and helps us make rational decisions. But in people with misophonia, the brain's threat response kicks in so quickly, it overrides the prefrontal cortex. This makes it incredibly difficult, if not impossible, to stay calm when hearing a trigger sound. But there was another key finding. The brain imaging revealed that people with misophonia have an abnormality in their brain's emotional control mechanism, causing their neural circuits to go into overdrive when they hear certain sounds. Researchers also discovered that brain activity in misophonia follows a different connectivity pattern to the frontal lobe, the part of the brain that usually suppresses strong emotional reactions. This means the brain has less ability to shut down or regulate the overwhelming response to the sound. All of this means that misophonia isn't just about being annoyed by sounds. It's about how the brain processes those sounds. And I have to just take a break, time out from research, because I love it when we have proof that our brain is actually functioning differently, because it almost like supports our struggle, right? It gives us like validation or verification, and it can help minimize our urge to judge or talk shit to ourselves about it. And so I think it's really cool that we actually know that there is research out there to show misophonia isn't just us getting annoyed. It isn't just us being super sensitive or whatever we might tell ourselves about it. Our brain is actually working differently. And the way that our brains process sounds versus people who don't have misophonia is very different. For people with misophonia, trigger noises aren't just irritating, they feel unbearable, almost like an intrusion that sets off an instant stress response. Our brains aren't overreacting on purpose. They're simply wired to interpret these sounds as genuine threats. And that's why these reactions feel so automatic and overwhelming, because they are. Dr. Sukhbinder Kumar, the lead researcher on the study, explains, quote, "We think this connection between the auditory system and the limbic system explains why misophonic reactions feel so instantaneous and controllable. It's not just that the sound is annoying. It's that the brain's threat system is activated before the person even has a chance to process what's happening. And the result? A flood of stress hormones, a racing heart, an intense feeling of anger or panic, and an overwhelming urge to escape the sound as quickly as possible." So if you have misophonia or know someone who does, just know that it's not just in your head, and it's not a choice. It's a neurological response, deeply rooted in how the brain connects sound and emotion. And understanding that is the first step toward finding ways to manage it. So is misophonia a real disorder? Here's where things get tricky. It's not officially recognized in the DSM. That's the manual doctors use to diagnose mental health conditions. But that doesn't mean it isn't real, because obviously not all issues are going to be in the DSM. And let's be honest, you guys know I feel this way, that the DSM isn't the end-all be-all. It's missing a lot of things, and it likes to pathologize a lot of things I don't think it should. So it's just a good place to start. I always see the DSM as like, it's a good place to start, but it's not all inclusive. And even in my older video about misophonia, I talked about how people with things like ADHD, OCD, or sensory processing disorders often report misophonic symptoms. Now, this connection to DSM diagnosable things makes sense because all of these conditions involved heightened sensitivity to sensory input in one way or another. But let's break it down further with examples and explanations for each condition if you think that this is how your misophonia originated, I guess. And starting off with ADHD, or attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and how it connects to misophonia, people with ADHD often experience sensory hypersensitivity, which means that we're going to have trouble filtering out background noise or other stimuli. Our brains tend to process sensory input differently, sometimes making certain sounds feel overwhelming or even painful. Like, for example, someone with ADHD may find it impossible to focus in a classroom because of the sound of someone clicking their pen repeatedly, while others can just tune it out. And the ADHD brain hyper-focuses on that sound. It can lead to more irritation or even an emotional outburst. You can see how this aligns with misophonia, where specific trigger sounds like chewing gum or tapping or breathing can cause an intense emotional reaction, often out of proportion to the sound itself. ADHD brains already struggle with attentional regulation, making it harder to ignore those noises. Moving on to OCD, or obsessive compulsive disorder, and misophonia. Now, OCD is characterized by intrusive thoughts and compulsions, right? The actions that we're taking, which can involve sensory-related fixations. Some people with OCD develop extreme discomfort with certain sounds, which can lead to compulsive avoidance or rituals to neutralize the distress. For example, a person with OCD might become hyper-aware of the sound of someone slurping soup and then feel an overwhelming need to leave the room or tap their fingers a certain number of times to cancel out the noise. Since OCD is often driven by distress and the need to control our environment, the inability to escape or stop a triggering noise can lead to heightened anxiety, rumination, or even compulsions that are aimed at alleviating the discomfort we feel. And this is where it overlaps with misophonia, where the emotional reaction to sounds, they can feel unbearable. Moving on to sensory processing disorder, or SPD, and misophonia. Now, SPD is a condition where the brain has a difficult time processing and responding appropriately to sensory input. Some people are hypersensitive to auditory stimuli, so things that they hear, right? Making everyday sounds feel physically painful or overwhelming. As an example, a child with SPD might scream or cover their ears when they hear someone chewing, not just because they dislike the sound, but because their nervous system processes it as an actual threat. Sound familiar? Or an unbearable sensory assault. Misophonia can be seen as a subset of auditory hypersensitivity, where specific sounds cause an automatic emotional fight or flight response. Many people with SPD report misophonic symptoms, particularly if they fall into the sensory over-responsive category. So as a key takeaway, ADHD, OCD, and SPD, sensory processing disorder, all involve differences in sensory processing, which can contribute to misophonia-like symptoms. People with ADHD may struggle with misophonia because their brains hyperfocus on and struggle to filter out certain sounds. People with OCD may experience misophonia through intrusive thoughts and compulsions related to sound triggers. And people with SPD may experience misophonia as a part of general hypersensitivity to sensory input, making specific sounds intolerable. And in a 2021 study from Oxford University, they found that 1 in 5 people, 1 in 5, has at least mild misophonia symptoms, suggesting that it exists on a spectrum. So while it's not classified as a disorder itself, research suggests that it's a neurological phenomenon, something real that's happening in our brains. So if misophonia makes everyday life miserable, what can we do about it? There's no official cure for misophonia, but researchers and clinicians have identified several treatments that can help manage symptoms and reduce distress. Yay, right? So let's break them down. First up is cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT. And it is a widely used therapy that helps people change their thoughts and emotional reactions to distressing experiences, including misophonic triggers. So how does it help? Instead of seeing a trigger sound as an unbearable threat, CBT helps reframe it as a neutral or manageable sound. This doesn't mean that we ignore the trigger. It means we reduce our emotional charge attached to it. If that doesn't make sense, here's a good example. Someone with misophonia might react with rage or panic when they hear chewing sounds. Through CBT, we might learn to identify the thoughts behind our reactions. For example, I can't stand this. And instead we turn it into, this sound is unpleasant, but I know I can manage it. And then we practice coping techniques to reduce our stress response. Another great tool or resource is white noise or earplugs. Blocking out trigger sounds is one of the simplest and most immediate ways to reduce misophonia distress, because we're essentially just minimizing our exposure to the triggers. And so by masking or drowning out trigger sounds, things like white noise machines or noise-canceling headphones or earplugs create an acoustic barrier, preventing the brain from going into overdrive. For example, if someone struggles with office noise, right, we can't focus, maybe it wants us to lash out, we feel, just rage-filled, then we might wear loop earplugs. It's not sponsored, but I wish it was. They're one of my faves. And they reduce sound intensity without completely blocking out conversations. At home, we could use a white noise app or a fan to help drown out any triggering sounds from roommates or family members. There's also exposure therapy. Exposure therapy is a technique where people are gradually exposed to their trigger sounds in a controlled, low-stress environment to reduce our automatic reactions over time. And how does it help? Well, instead of avoiding trigger sounds completely, which can make our reactions worse over time, controlled exposure helps our brain adapt and slowly become less reactive. For example, a therapist might start by playing a very quiet recording of a trigger sound, just enough for you to notice it, but not cause intense stress. Over multiple sessions, they'll slowly increase the volume and teach coping strategies like deep breathing or other self-soothing techniques like shaking out until the sound becomes less overwhelming. There's also mindfulness and relaxation techniques. Since misophonia triggers our brain's fight or flight system, relaxation techniques can help calm our nervous system down and reduce overall reactivity to sounds. Mindfulness encourages being present in the moment and observing reactions without judgment. This can help us recognize early signs of distress and respond proactively rather than reacting with an intense emotion. Like, for example, a person with misophonia might practice box breathing. We inhale for 4 seconds, hold it at the top for 4 seconds, and exhale for 4, and go around, do it 4 times. If we hear a trigger sound, we can try that technique, right? I know it's not perfect, but it's just another kind of tool in your tool belt. And over time, this can train our body to stay calm instead of immediately tensing up or lashing out at someone. And there are other relaxation strategies too. Things like progressive muscle relaxation, where we systematically, from our toes up to our head or head to our toes, we tense and relax our muscles. We could also do guided imagery. Maybe you picture a relaxing place just to counteract the stress. Like, imagine that you're floating in the water and your ears are under the water. You can't really hear anything. We could also try a meditation app like Calm or Headspace to just build up our resilience over time. But there's this really cool thing when I was doing research for this that I want to talk a little bit about, and that is neuromodulation. Can we rewire the misophonic response? Scientists are exploring neuromodulation techniques which use mild electrical or magnetic stimulation to alter brain activity. This is fascinating to me because I've heard from a lot of you that use like vagus nerve stimulators, and some of you've tried TMS, transcranial magnetic stimulation. I'm not going to talk about those here because that would be a whole nother video, but this was really fascinating to me because I wondered if you have done TMS or if you utilize vagus nerve stimulators, if you had misophonia, did it help? I'm curious. But anyways, how does this neuromodulation work, or how does it help? It targets the brain areas that are responsible for misophonic reactions, like we talked about earlier, right? Researchers hope to reduce the intensity of the response. Though it's still in the early stages, this approach shows promise for reducing hyperactivity in the anterior insular cortex and helping the brain regulate its emotional response to triggers. I wonder if it also helps our amygdala. Maybe. It's fascinating, right? Super cool. And some early studies also suggest, this is where I went down this rabbit hole, that transcranial magnetic stimulation, TMS, or vagus nerve stimulation, VNS, could help rebalance brain activity, making trigger sounds feel less threatening over time. But the research, we still need more of it. It's still early stages. And so it might not be available to you, but as they continue to research it and find out more, hopefully these methods are out there and something that you can access easily. And I also have a video about a vagus nerve stimulation if you're interested. I'll link it below. There's things that you can do today to help you feel better and improve your mood. While there's no one-size-fits-all solution, the good news is that misophonia can be managed. Different techniques work for different people, so if one approach doesn't help, another might. That's why I gave a lot of different strategies. But the key is to find one that works for you, whether that's therapy, sound management, like earplugs and stuff like that, mindfulness, or future medical treatments. The more we understand misophonia, the better equipped we are to reduce its impact and to regain control over our daily lives. I don't personally have misophonia, but a few of my friends do, and I've seen firsthand how much it can impact your daily life. And when I first made my video about it, I don't even know how many years ago that was, I heard from so many people who told me that it was the first time they felt truly seen and understood. And it made me realize just how many people are struggling with this. And so I want to offer, before we finish today, just some ways that you can manage right now, things that you can do today that could help. And the first up, and we kind of talked about it a little bit before, is noise-canceling headphones. When we can't get away from a noise, it might be best just for us to try to drown it out. And it's seriously a game changer. I personally love Sony noise-canceling headphones. I also have some Sennheisers I've used for a while. But the most reasonably priced, the cheapest option, I think, are loop earplugs. Now, they have this version called Switch, and it has like a little toggle on the top of the loop. And you can easily shift between 3 different modes. The first one is completely open, like it's not doing anything. The second is one that knocks out background noise so you can focus. It's called Focus, I think. And then the third is completely noise canceling. These are great. And I think they're like $40. Another thing that we can do today is to work to regulate our stress levels. Misophonia is way worse, my friends have told me, when you're already anxious or overwhelmed. If we get enough sleep, we're taking care of our basic needs, taking our medication as prescribed, and managing, our life, maybe drinking enough water, eating regularly, we're going to set ourselves up to be better able to manage our triggers and not blow up immediately. Because we have more to work with, right? We have our resilience. It's like that poker chip analogy I've mentioned over the years where we wake up with a certain number of poker chips, and every issue that we have to navigate or manage without reacting costs us some of those chips. We want to make sure that we're starting each day with the most chips possible. And that's those things like eating regularly, drinking water, getting enough sleep, all of that. So make sure you're making time for that so that your resilience is higher, so you're not so reactive. Another thing that we can do is communicate with people. Let close friends or family know what helps. Let them know what your triggers are. Because if we let them know what sets us off, they can try to not do those things. Like my friend Todd hates pen clicking, like terribly. So if I'm ever around him, there's no way I'm going to do that. It's not hard for me to not. It costs me nothing, right? It's easy. And if I forget and he mentions it, then I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry, right? Just him letting me know allows me to act differently so that it's easier for him. And so give people a chance, to meet you where you're at, because it will allow them to understand that when we ask like, hey, please stop making a noise, they'll do it. We just have to give them an opportunity to help and support us. And most importantly, know that you're not crazy. Misophonia is a real thing. The truth about misophonia is that there's still a lot we don't know. Why does it affect some people and not others? Can we train the brain to ignore trigger sounds altogether? And could there be a genetic component? Researchers are still figuring it out. But in the meantime, if certain sounds make you want to scream or wring someone's neck, just know you're not alone. Have you ever experienced misophonia? What sounds trigger you? Let me know in the comments. And let me know what's helped you most. Are there things that I didn't mention that have been a great resource to you? Let us know. And if you want to keep exploring the fascinating science of the brain, subscribe for more deep dives like this. Have a wonderful week, and I'll see you next time.